Hi everyone, it's Richard here. I'm really pleased to be here, and I hope I serve you by really helping you get your grassland management up to spec, and it helps you save a fortune on your bucket feed and your grassland management costs. And I sincerely wish your hay barns are full like mine. So the point of this challenge is really to just help you get to grips with what you need to be doing on your own land and your tenanted land to grow the best crops you can and have the healthiest horses you can. Now, there's a whole load of benefits to um, really bring in some of the best practices we've got in agriculture at the moment into your equine businesses. So I will, without further ado, I will get on with the presentation. Hi, so we've covered the main points really as to why it's a good idea to do this in some of the other bite-sized videos we've done on getting the best out of your grazing and your grassland. There's obviously a lot of benefits to doing this work in terms of having better drainage, having better soil structure, having healthier horses, having more wildlife on your farm, saving loads of money on bucket feed and bought-in feed that you would otherwise need to meet your horse's nutritional requirements. So I'm hoping this little one-day challenge will really equip you with all of the knowledge you need to get cracking. And we'll look at all of the different processes you'll need to go through, and they really are, don't be overwhelmed by all of this. This is an opportunity for you just to take immediate action. You don't have to know the ins and outs and the scientific agronomic knowledge that I've got in detail straight away. You just need to go through these basic steps of getting your soils tested, inspecting them, interpreting the results, all of those sorts of things that I'm going to teach you in this course. And once you've gone through those, you'll have a much better understanding of how to do these things and what you're looking to try and achieve. We can cover all of the low cost options first. So really that's where I like to start, because it's things that you can do that cost next to nothing, which make a massive impact and start saving you money. So I mean, you guys know that I started off in a mess here, and my mess has become this message to you guys. I've obviously got the agriculture and the degree and the agronomy knowledge, and I started off with poor fields, very poor fields, some of them, and the livestock, there was plenty of growth there and they ate everything, but they just weren't growing. Obviously my situation is sheep and beef, but obviously we produce specialist haylage for the equine market, and I'm not a bragger, but I have a brand new tractor which is sat in our farmyard, and that is pretty much paid for by the haylage sales. So the equine industry is worth, I think, £4.7 billion a year to the UK. That's including everything, horse sales, vets bills, the lot, not just feed. But that gives you an indication of the type of money that people are spending on their horses on a daily basis. And I realise from selling haylage that especially the specialist haylage that I sell, that people want it and they need that nutrition. And when you go to them, it's a £1 million house, and the fields haven't had sort of 200 quid's worth of lime spread on them, and they're just not growing. And it just I wanted to produce this training series really just to try and serve the equine industry, which are my customers. I'm kind of doing myself out of haylage sales possibly here, but I wanted to help because there's obviously a need for it, and if I can make an impact, then I'll be very happy. So anyway, we'll move on to the next slide. So in contents, I just wanted to put this on just as a sort of a memory jogger for myself, but also so you guys can see the kind of the layout and the structure that I'm going to go through on this. So I spend most of my time out on farm sort of digging these soil profile pits and then looking for compaction issues and things, because they're the first places you want to start when you're addressing your soil issues. So when you look at what we're going to be going through on this, we're going to look at the why. So when I say regen ag, this isn't some airy fairy stuff. This is the best from organic farming systems and the best from regenerative agricultural systems. And I've personally tried most of these things, so I know what works. And you won't spend a lot of time, and you don't have to buy particular equipment. You just have to be able to hire in the right contractors with the right machinery. Now, obviously, I contract out round Dorset, round here in Dorchester, and I'm prepared to go a few miles, 6 or 10 miles maybe in the tractor. Don't really want to go much further than that, but there will be contractors in your area with the right equipment. So it's really about making the right assessment of your land and then getting the right people in to address it. And then I think you'll find that your grass growth, it probably goes through the roof, especially if we address all of the other underlying causes of why it's not really performing. So we'll look at the why, and then we'll also look at assessing your existing situation, which I've kind of spoken about. Then the soil management and the nutrients. So we'll also be looking at the vegetation and choice of species. That has a massive impact on how your grasslands perform, particularly in drought conditions, or in terms of how deep rooting those plants are. And a lot of varieties that are on sale, I've seen I'm quite into my seed specifics and whether they're kind of tested by laboratories, and there's a lot of cheap seed on the market and it's pretty rubbish. So I'll help you with choice of species, because a cheap not very good variety sort of seed mix will be, I don't know, £60, and a really good mix will be 75-80, and there's a huge amount of difference in terms of what it's going to do when it's on the ground and it's growing. So we'll look at that. We'll look at establishment of new seeds and the aftercare that they need. And we'll also have a kind of I'll give you some tuition in terms of around your grazing and your cutting routines, and that will really help you. That helped me a lot. I've went from obviously, like I said, really poor grazing to a really good mixture of cutting and grazing, and a really powerful soil which was able to fuel the growth that I needed to be able to graze and cut some haylage from my land. So we'll look at all of those. So when we're looking at the why do you want to do this, or the why do this, then obviously the massive savings on bucket feed is just kind of the main point really. It's also nice looking at fields that look really green and really nice, and that's really, I enjoy going out into our fields and walking through them and thinking, I'm doing a good job. This is good. I'm going to have a amazing cut of haylage, or I'm going to have a really good amount of grazing in front of me, and that helps a lot. And obviously some of you guys are managing laminitic ponies, and that is an issue, so we need to look at what goes into those seed mixtures. I still think you need really good soil structure and you need the right grasses, but obviously we'll be looking more at the low energy grasses as well. Most of the customers that I've been selling products for laminitic ponies are from sort of native species mixtures, which are generally lower in sugar and lower in energy, and don't trigger that that laminitis and a good sort of winter feed. Whereas our performance horses that we cater for, they're looking at, they want their sugars, it's kind of 9.5. That's pretty powerful stuff. It's borderline silage. It's real racehorse food, and the mixtures we put in there give them a nice variety, so they have good gut health. So we'll look at all of the kind of reasons why it's important to tailor what you're doing for the horses you've got. If they're all young, growing on performance horses that you're breaking in, or however your system runs or your yard runs, we just tailor the choice of species. I think all of the soil management stuff will and the drainage and all of this will be kind of concurrent throughout, really. But the choice of seed mixtures and time of cutting and things like that will change depending on what horses you're providing for, and their individual nutritional requirements. So we can look at all of that. It matters not if you're organic or conventional. And there's obviously advantages to managing the land for healthy soil. I mean, the soils really are the backbone of what we're doing here. The green bit on the top is just kind of the bit we see, and everything going on underneath has really been kind of overlooked in the past. After the invention of artificial fertilizers, the soil was kind of it was called dirt, and it was basically the rooting medium. That's what they sort of, it was just there to hold the plants, and you could put all these bagged fertilizers on, and you could get away with it, as far as they thought. But obviously, we now know, and science has evolved so much. I mean, there's not many conservation agronomists like myself out there. I know of one other up in the east, and we all own microscopes, and we all look at the soil in detail, because we have to. That's our job, and working with nature is the only way to really kind of get the best out of it without having to need chemical inputs, really. So by looking after your soils, you will get massive benefit. And we all have areas that are sacrificial, that maybe get a bit smashed up in the winter for turnout or for winter feeding, and there's kind of ways we can manage that and do some corrective management in the spring, and also make sure the soil is in a healthy state that it can recover quite well. So we've already spoken about the improvements to horse health, and the different forage plants. They make excellent hay, and they're a real variety in terms of the grazing management, and I think having that variety in your horse's diet makes the biggest difference. That's, I think, why we've got, apart from being able to grow specific mixes for specific horses, so either the Lamanitics or the performance industry or somewhere in the middle, I think that's why our haylage is so good, is because of the mix of different forage species in there. So there's not just grasses, there's all the plantains, there's the bird's foot trefoil, there's some chicory and various other bits and pieces, and they all add to a nice varied diet, which obviously, as in our own guts, I'm sure that we grow the bacteria we need for our particular diet. So if you only eat potatoes, you'll only grow the bacteria in your gut that are that act on that starchy material. Whereas if you're eating a real variety of fruit and vegetables and having a really well balanced diet, you'll have a really healthy gut teeming with all the right bacteria. So that's really the purpose of why we're doing this. So let's move on. So this next slide's really looking at your existing situation and the conditions on your land. So we need to know what the starting point is, and it's important to have realistic expectations. You're not going to go from new forest acid grassland to wonderful species rich hay meadows in an instant. We need to get there in a sensible kind of way, and so the first thing to do is to do some soil analysis. Now there's loads of laboratories and there's loads of people that can do this for you, including myself, but really the best way of doing it is to go out on your own, when you've got a 10-20 minutes, walk with the dogs or kids, whatever. Walk a W shape in the field, so none of the fields are a perfect square. Most of the time they're all sort of odd shapes, but look at the field on a map possibly, and draw a W on there and sort of plan your route roughly just by drawing this W shape onto the field. Try and avoid the wet areas, the compacted gateways and headlands. So put it in the main. Try and put your W shape in the middle of the main body of the grazing, and then every time you walk, say, I don't know, depending on how big the field is, 10 steps, 15 steps, maybe if it's a huge field, every 20 or 30 paces, stop and take a soil sample. Now, there's various ways you can do this. You can do this. I've used a spade. I've got a proper corer that's made of stainless steel, but you don't really want to use anything that's ferrous metal, because that can spike the soil analysis results in various ways, but I won't go into that. So really what you want, and what I've done before to save some time, which is a really good way of doing it, is use an apple corer. So if your ground's not too gravelly and hard, and you pick, maybe a time after a bit of rain or something like that, if you go and get an apple corer from a hardware shop or a kitchenware shop, they're normally made out of stainless steel, so they're perfect for the job, and you can stop every 10-15 paces. You can take a core as you're walking that W shape on the field, and that all goes into a bucket. Don't worry about how much you need to collect, just take a core, so as deep as it practically possible, so sort of 3 inches I think maximum with an apple corer. That'll be plenty, and have a bucket and just have a stick or something so you don't need to put your fingers near the sharp bits of the apple corer, and just decant that into a bucket as you're walking around, and that will be really good. So once you've walked your W shape and you've collected your however many cores of soil, you need to mix them up really well. Don't worry about the grass or the leaves or the organic, because that's all organic matter and that will factor in your soil analysis. So you just have to sort of break it up as best you can and mix it as best you can. And spends a bit of time doing that, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever it takes, and just kind of break that up. And then really you need to be looking at sort of 250-300 grams at least, really, going into a bag. Some of the different labs will tell you different amounts, but really that's what you need. You don't want to take, you don't want your results to your analysis bag to be returned because there's not enough soil for a sample in there. So you need to take sort of a bit, half a kilo is probably too much, but it needs to be somewhere in the middle, really. So once you've done that, then you need to book them in. I personally, there's obviously lots of labs out there. There's Eurofins, there's various laboratories that we've used in the past, but actually we've found that we've got a rep in a local agricultural store, and I can just drop the samples off and she'll get them sent straight away, and my analysis will be back pretty quickly. And for I think 15 quid for a basic one, I tend to go for the extended grassland laboratory analysis, which also does all of the micronutrients as well, just to make sure that there's no kind of potential deficiencies building in my soil. And also I know then what to give them in terms of mineral licks and boluses. So that's what I do, and that really, you need to get that done. That is a priority. If you can get that done in the next few weeks, then you're on to being able to interpret those results and know where you need to take it, and that really informs all other management. So after you've done your soil sample, you can hand texture a soil sample. So if you just search on the internet for a soil texture triangle, there's it's basically a way of assessing soils and looking at the sand, silt and clay content of soils, and that gives you a really good indication of what you're dealing with. Some of you already know exactly what type of soil you're on, but when you actually really get into a proper soil texture hand texture analysis, then you start to break down some of the kind of someone might say, oh, it's just a clay soil. Well, actually sometimes it's a clay soil, but it's got quite a lot of silt in it as well, or sand in it, so that affects things, and it means that you've got a better understanding of your soil and what it can cope with and how to manage it, because a solid Denchworth clay or something is very different to a clay that's got a lot of sand or silt in it, and that sort of in its nature behaves differently in different weather conditions, in climate and in management. So that will help as well if you can do that, but really soil analysis is number one. So dig some soil inspection pits and look for physical signs of damage, such as compaction or damage to the structure. And when I say structure, I mean soil is formed with kind of air, water, mineral, organic matter, and there's lots of components to it. And when I say air, I mean there should be spaces between all of the pores and the soil aggregates. So it's not a kind of, it's sort of like, really, it takes you a while to get your eye in, but once you've kind of got your eye in, you'll know if you're looking at a really compacted soil, because it will come up looking, huge, massive, blocky structures with slate-like lines in it where it's sort of been compacted. I mean, headlands and gateways are always a good example. If you want to look at a bad soil, go and dig a bit in your gateway and look at how smashed up it is and stuck together, and there's no air space and there's no organic matter, and plant rooting's restricted, and it's, I mean, some of them some compacted layers that I've seen before, the roots have gone down maybe a couple of inches or whatever in through the organic matter at the top, and then they've literally gone horizontal because they can't penetrate through that compacted soil. And that's obviously why the cropping in those fields is so bad, and why they can't grow a hay crop or have enough grazing, and why they hold water and over the winter and stay what we call a perch water table, where you basically end up with a pond on top of your field, and the drainage below that compaction layer is fine, and it just can't get through that compacted layer. So we really spend some time looking at your fields and see what you come up with, and all you need for that is a spade, and I'll show you it at some point. I'll post a video or something on how to dig a soil inspection pit properly and what to look for. So look at the plant species that are currently in your field as well. So that's really key. What have you got growing there at the moment? If you've got lots of buttercups, lots of stinging nettles, lots of docks, and some grass in between, then there's probably a problem there. And if you've got a perfect grass field, then then we might be okay, and we might want to look at just the soil analysis and possibly just the chemical constitution, and look at what we can do to improve things a little bit. Whereas if you've got a field of buttercups and weeds and various other problems going on, then there's some more issues that need looking at. So with all of this, it's really good to look at your best bit and at least do a soil pit inspection pit on the best bit of land, and then look at some of your worst areas, and that will give you a really good kind of feel for what you've got on your farm. There's loads of things, like Cranfield University have got the Landis, if you type in it's soil map, I think soil viewer map or something like that. I'll post the link to that. I think I've already posted that in our Dorset in our equestrian grassland management Facebook group that I started, and so that's there. Have a look on that, because that's quite a good soil map. It's not as good as the as the ones that are done years ago, where they give you the big A1 map with it and a book. That was really good, but it's got a lot of detail in there, and it will help you kind of get to grips with what you're doing. So everyone, get out there and get your soil samples done. So going on from what we said a minute ago about constituents of your soil, what the soil is made up of. I mentioned that it's got the air, the water, the organic matter, and the mineral content, and you can see from this little pie chart that this is kind of the average kind of constituents of a healthy soil. So in those pore spaces, you've got the air and the water, and they'll be moving around, and that's absolutely needed to make everything kind of soluble, and you need that kind of free movement of air and water in your soil profile. The other parts will be the organic matter and the mineral. Now the organic matter will mostly build from the top, and that will either come from spread manure or from leaf and grass material, and basically any organic matter that's breaking down on the surface. And you need a healthy soil to have the right soil fauna to break that down. So when I mean soil fauna, I mean everything from the earthworms down to the microscopic stuff that I look at under the microscope. And then when I talk about mineral content, I'm talking about all of the kind of bedrock and all of the solid stuff that isn't going to be moving around so much, and is going to be forming the kind of basis of your soil. Obviously, when we speak about chemical analysis, we're looking at mostly kind of what's in that mineral content, and you know, that's what the analysis comes back of. On the left, we've got the a kind of a soil profile, and in a soil profile you have horizons, and so you can see these quite clearly on this diagram, and the different depths, you know. So you've got like the 0 to 2 inches, which is the kind of organic matter rich surface of the soil, where the plant is sort of actively rooting into everything else. Then you've got the kind of the topsoil layer, which is the A horizon, and then the B horizon, which is the kind of subsoil, and then the C is the kind of parent material and rock. That's a very brief explanation of what's in a soil horizon, but it's important to understand that, because you really need to know whether, you know, I've had customers that I've been out and I've been doing some contracting work for them, and we've gone in to do a bit of sward lifting with a flat lifter or something, and when you've dug down at, you know, they're on solid clay underneath that kind of topsoil layer, and they're constantly struggling with drainage issues. So actually just doing a flat lift, actually they need some mold drainage put in that field, or some actual land drains put in, to be able to give them winter grazing without sort of smashing the field up too badly. But anyway, that's just a quick slide on that. So just to recap on understanding your soil: get on out with a spade and dig some soil pits, and lots of them if possible and time allows. Just go out there and start looking at soil, and take an eye lens or a magnifying glass with you and a pocket knife, and then you can kind of pick away at stuff and have a look at it, and you can kind of get an idea of what you've got, whether it's compacted, whether there's any kind of soil issues there. Some of you will be on wet soils and you'll see rusty mottles in there. Don't be worried about that. That's completely natural. That just means that it's periodically waterlogged over the winter, and you get those kind of ferrous deposits that appear as like brown rusty mottles in the soil, and that is pretty natural for a lot of soils. So do your hand texturing. Check out the soil hand texture guides online. Try and have a look at any soil maps you've got. Get your soil samples taken with the apple corer and the bucket method. Walk the W shape and then get those off to the lab. Give your agricultural store a ring, or speak to someone like Eurofins or NRM laboratories. Do that, and then look at if you've got any old farm maps, or the previous owner might have drainage maps on your farm if you've got a wet farm, and where your ditches where the drains meet your ditches, and if you can clear some of those drains and ditches, and reinstate the kind of flow for that hydrology through your land, then you're going to be onto a winner with that. If there's a problem there, of course. If not, then and your farm is very free draining and has no ditches or drains, then ignore that. So interpreting your findings, just take a pad with you and a pencil and just scribble down all of your kind of findings when you're going through this. When I'm working for customers, I'll ask myself a lot of questions when I'm out in the field. And I've gone through some of that with you about kind of compaction and what's the depth of it and how bad is it, because obviously from my point of view I can go in there with a tractor and I can subsoil or flat lift a field. When I say flat lift, it's like a cultivator. It doesn't disturb the grass that much, but it heaves everything up a bit, and it creates fractures in the soil, which is a really good thing on a compacted soil, and it reinstates a lot of the kind of natural rainfall infiltration, and it increases plant rooting abilities by creating those fissures and fractures in the soil, allowing plants to get their roots down again, and also for the water to penetrate into the soil profile properly. So you need to know what depth that is. If you've got surface compaction, then that's really easy, and flat lift will do that no problem. If your compaction's down at the plough line and the previous farmer or owner or yourself ploughed when it was kind of suboptimal and they smeared a layer and compacted a layer with the plough, then that could be like 10 inches down. And that's not it's not an easy job, and it's not that cheap because you use a lot of diesel trying to address those sorts of things. But you need to know about it, because there's no point carrying out a field operation like that that's going to cost you a few £100, possibly more on bigger fields, when the issue, you're not actually addressing the issue. So you need to know where it is. So what depth is it, and actually have a ruler or a tape measure or something with you to be able to go, well, that's actually it, 6 inches down, there's some compaction there. And that could be for a multitude of reasons. A lot of the time it's surface compaction from stocking fields with horses or cattle or something in the winter, and you get a lot of kind of destruction of the surface soil, but underneath it is pretty good. So there's horses for courses, shall we say. And we've already mentioned talking about the natural hydrology, and what's it doing, and where's the water moving from and to, and how's it using your land and your farm. Obviously we really want to kind of slow water down, and having good ditches and good ditch network really helps with that. We don't really want to be racing water through the farm or through the land in general, because obviously we get a lot of erosion problems if it's all kind of piped. But at the same time, if you reinstate a couple of field drains, I've been to one farm in the past, and I have literally gone and I knew exactly what the problem was, and he thought it was going to cost thousands, and he had me out there, and I literally charged him a couple of £100, and I basically spent like a day with another guy, and we just went round and we just unblocked all of his land drains that were flowing into a ditch, and the ditch had obviously been maintained in the recent past, but it's silted up a bit, so we just kind of unblocked everything, and he basically was so happy. It was like a different field. It was all backing up in all the land drains, and it just wasn't. It was leaving a lot of the field, sort of 50-60% of the field was water. It was sodden basically. And after we unblocked some of those drains, the ditches were full and slowly moving, and his field was his grazing was just kind of reinstated. So yeah. Really pay attention to how the water and the hydrology is moving on your field, on your farm, and on your land. look at the weed issues, what you've got. I mean, you can get a lot of kind of overgrazing with horses. You know, they'll only eat what they like. They don't like the sour grass. They don't like a lot of the weeds. The buttercups taste incredibly bitter, so they'll only eat them as a last resort. So if they're clipping the grass around and you're continually overgrazing those areas, they'll be clipping the grass all around these weeds and giving these weeds a really an unfair advantage, really. So by getting some mowing in the mix and after grazing, and if possible look at your grazing management and how you're doing things. Moving things around behind an electric fence is a really good idea. That really helps. And you don't get any of those overgrazing issues. What we actually do is we generally on most of our land we'll put livestock behind an electric fence. We'll move them fairly regularly, and then we'll shoot in with the tractor and the mower afterwards, and we'll top off anything that we don't like the look of, patches of stinging nettles or buttercups and things like that. And obviously the chain harrow is pretty good for removing things like buttercups and things, other weed species. Docks are obviously a bit more persistent, especially on our farm. We're not actually certified organic, but we don't use any sprays. Obviously they can become a bit of an issue, but continual mowing, they don't like that, and we want to carry on managing without sprays, because a lot of the sprays will take out the docks and some of the weeds, but they'll also take out a lot of the beneficial plant species in our herbal ley mixtures, like the clovers and all of that sort of stuff. So we want to absolutely preserve that, because that's what gives us the cracking good forage analysis and the really healthy livestock. Right, hi guys. This is probably one of the most important bits, I think, of the course, is interpreting your chemical soil analysis findings. So when you get your soil analysis back from the laboratory, it will probably give you soil index ratings. And I've worked with loads of people over the years, and they think there's something kind of mystical almost about how this works, and it's really not. I think that some people overthink the kind of soil analysis side of things. It really is as straightforward as this. It's like a set of balancing scales. If you take hay every year off a field, you'll effectively be mining nutrients from your land, and it will take a fair while, or a lot of chemical fertilizer or manure, to bring it back up to spec. Obviously there's natural soil fauna and flora will be mineralizing nutrients in your soil, but as a food source they need organic matter, bulky organic matter, in the form of normally muck going back on the land if you're organic, or if you're a conventional farmer or land manager, you're going to need a fertilizer input, normally an NPK with some varying micronutrients that you can get from things like calcified seaweed and various other stuff like that. So start with the PK and magnesium. They should all be at index level 2, which is perfect. So if I look at my soil analysis and the indexes are 2, I know my management is good, my soils are not impoverished, and that they're going to be yielding correctly through the right amount of grazing and the right amount of hay cutting. They're going to be spot on for what their potential is. They're going to be right, whatever soil type they are. Now, just going back to what we talked about earlier, you can have an index of 2, but if you've got compaction, physical soil compaction, your yield will be down. That's just the way it works. And so when we look at pH, soil pH should be around 6.5 to 7, which is kind of a neutral soil. Now, some of my clients, obviously this course is going out all over the world, so there's going to be people in California watching this, and their soil types and their plant species are going to be completely different to what we've got here in Dorset in England. But I've got clients that are in the New Forest. They're on very thin acid soils. To try and correct those soils to a 6.5 or 7 is near on impossible. So you have to work with what you've got. I'm just kind of giving you the kind of for our soils here, we're on the chalk, so we tend to be higher than a 7. We tend to be more of a 7.5 or even an 8 on these chalk soils that we've got. But 6.5 to 7 is perfect. If you can get as close to that as possible, what happens is as the acidity increases, so you get down towards the 5 or something like that, you get a lockup of nutrients. So those nutrients, even though they're in the soil and they may appear in your soil analysis, they are unavailable for plants. And that's just kind of, we could go very technical on this, but I'm trying to keep this as general as possible. Also bear in mind that soil pH is exponential. Okay, so every time a 6 to a 7, that's the difference of times 10. Okay, so a 7 to a 5, if you thought it was around a 7 and it's actually a 5, well, that's a huge difference. So it's not just one scale, it's exponential, and you need to bear that in mind. So look at what the previous cropping was. Maybe it's been in long-term grass. Maybe you've grown a crop on it, and a crop of wheat. Some of my farmer customers grow some wheat, but they might put it back into grazing. So look at what the previous crop is. Remember, if you take your hay, if you're taking hay or haylage cuts off it, then you need to put some muck back, or some fertilizer needs to go on, and that can be done at a specifically calculated amount. So there is a book in England called RB209, which is a nutrient management guide, and that's a specialist text. And for agronomists, I have a copy here, and that helps you, basis and facts qualified people like myself are able to look in there and calculate exactly what the nutrient offtake is going to be, so that the right amount of muck or fertilizer can go back on. You will, like I say, effectively mine nutrients, and you will, over a period of years and years, I've been to fields that are literally growing 4 inches of grass, barely 4 inches of grass, and that's from 10 years plus of hay cutting every year and nothing going back. But obviously, I was able to help with that, and now they're growing a decent crop of grass. So seek to correct your soils. It'll be the one of the best investments you ever make. And if things are off the mark, then you'll notice huge drops in performance, both in terms of grazing availability and how long it is through the season. If you can keep your horses on turnout because you've got well drained fields that are growing enough grass, if you can keep them on turnout till December, when the winter really sort of starts to kick in, then that's a massive bonus. Whereas if you're sort of having to drag them in at the end of September because they've because the fields are wet and poached, the drainage isn't any good, and there's no grass for them, then that's not helping you at all. So just a note on this is that if your land's designated, so in England here we have sites of special scientific interest or various other landscape kind of designations, obviously New Forest National Park regulations, you need to speak with your local authority or the people in office about whether you can make alterations to your land, and that applies to my customers in America as well. You need to check with your local authorities to make sure that you are allowed to make any of those amendments. That's just me covering my own back. So yeah, you really need to correct those soil and correct your make amendments to your soil if they're not at that soil index of 2. And this is the biggest one at the bottom. I don't know why I've waited till last for this one, but if lime's required, do that first. It likes to be on its own in the soil, and it doesn't like to be with muck or fertilizer. It's depending on the product you apply and the fineness of the grinding on lime. That's how quick that dictates how quickly it works. Normally it will work pretty quickly some of the new liming products they've got, but ground chalk or ground limestone takes a while to work in the soil, and it's one of the most forgotten and major things you can do in terms of soil alterations to get your land healthy and fit again. Now, horses do tend to turn the grassland acidic after a while. And I think my customers refer to it as sour grass and things like that. And it's a really important thing, and it's really funny because when we go to these big expos and farming shows, all the fertilizer and agronomy salesmen are all in these big flash tents with all of this kind of kit and stuff on display, and the guy selling the ground limestones in this sort of a shipping container and a deck chair. And he is probably the most important person there, so really look very closely at your pH and what it should be for your particular farm, wherever you are in the world. If you can get your pH right and you can get your physical soil state right in terms of addressing any compaction, and then you can bring your soil indexes up to index 2, you will have a massive chance of increasing your yields, having better grazing, healthier horses, healthier land. It's better for the sort of soil flora and fauna as well. Everything works optimally if you can get that kind of 6.57 and a soil index of 2 and no issues of compaction. So anyway, I kind of went to town a bit too much on that, but I think it's important. Okay, so when we're looking at the composition of the vegetation in some of the new seed mixes that are out there, kind of the conventional mixes were as perennial ryegrasses, a bit of fescue, and some timothy, particularly for the horsey market, and little other things really. Some of the new herbal ley mixtures, and like I say, seed reps, apples are not always apples, or I'll say that again. Not all apples compare, and that's the same with seed merchants. So if you're looking at the herbal ley mixtures, make sure that you're buying from a reputable seed merchant who has got a history of delivering results, because we've had some rubbish seed in the past, and I've switched suppliers a few times and I found some really good ones, and I think it comes from the suppliers that they're buying off and the varieties that those suppliers are growing. So look for a good one, and you will be rewarded. So really there's lots of things that you can put into your seed mixture, whether you're just harrowing and over sowing it with a spinner, spinning some seed on and rolling it in this time, sort of September in the autumn, or it's a spring reseed. Obviously you need to make sure that the moisture content's there in the soil, or some rainfalls forecast to be able to get this germinated and establishing properly. But the sort of things that you can be adding to your seed mixtures are sort of things like yarrow and burnet, and sheep's parsley, and the plantains are really good as well, and some of them as well, like the samfoin and the chicory. It's not in this mix that's I've got as an example, the herbal ley mixture on the screen, but I mean some of these mixtures are natural anthelmytics, so they'll actually help worm your livestock and your horses, and they really promoting kind of a really healthy horse gut is really key, I think, because your horse will perform better when you're riding it if it's in tip-top shape, and these are really cheap ways of buying a different bag of seed can make all the difference, and I know that from personal experience. I really I went to town on my herbal ley mixtures, and I have been rewarded by just having lots of wonderful customers that always want my haylage. We obviously produce the small bale haylage for a specific market, and people, it's great when you go to somewhere, a performance equine event, and and you can see these really smart lorries with these really smart horses, and then you see some of your products sat outside the lorries, you know that you're onto a winner. So really, this herbal ley mixtures, they're not expensive. I mean, they relatively are, I suppose, to a bag of normal seed, but you know, it's a few quid extra, and it makes a lot of difference. And I think you'll also get there's lots of other benefits in terms of the way that these plants root. They're completely different. So some have got long tap roots, and they help build better soil structure. And when they eventually die off, they leave these kind of fissures in the soil that all of the water and nutrients can travel down. And so you get lots of kind of other benefits, such as the bacteria and the fungal hyphae, which naturally occurs in the soil. They're specific to a lot of plant species, so if you've only got grasses in there, you're not getting the diversity of bacteria and fungi that you need in there. And so everything, you'll just notice that your soils will start to improve naturally by having a lot more beneficial plant species in there. And obviously you're going to get the benefits from having a better horse, a happier, healthier one that's more competitive when you're out riding. So there's lots of benefits there. So we mentioned earlier about the benefits of having herbal ley mixtures in your pasture, and I just wanted to quickly explain. I haven't managed to make any graphics for this, but you'll have to just kind of try and visualize it. But there's a bulking effect which Charles Darwin proved from mixed species of plants. And if you have a field of grass, it will yield X. If you have a field of herbal ley mixture, it will yield considerably more, because the plant species are all rooting at different levels, so using different parts of the soil horizon. They're having extra access to nutrients that grass roots wouldn't reach, so you get a bonus in that you get an increased yield from having these multi-species in your pasture. I've already mentioned that they're natural anthelmintics, so you get this worming effect on your horses as well, so gut health improves in that respect. And it also kind of helps, particularly with our livestock. It cuts down the use of routine wormers, and we don't do any routine worming now. We always do a fecal egg counts on the dung, and if there's a need for it, then we'll do it. So soil GUM, it's normally produced as part of root exudates, and it's really referred to as the glue that holds the soil together. So having multiple species all producing at different levels, you're getting more of it, and so you get an enhanced soil structure through the extra mycorrhizal activity that's going on, and all the interactions that you're getting under the ground that we can't see. So there's a real positive for it, and that obviously leads to improved soil fertility, which is what we all want, really. So I promised you that we would talk about kind of establishment of new seed and the aftercare. So really there's kind of a process to achieving it, to achieving good results anyway, because like me, I'm sure you don't want your fields out of action for longer than necessary. So you need to defoliate what's already there, because otherwise you're going to have some competition. So if you're running on an organic system, you probably need to plough or cultivate. I don't personally like leaving the soil bare for any longer than possible, because you lose a lot of carbon that way, and also the soil does not like direct sunlight on it, really. So we try and get it covered as quickly as possible. So if I go through these and kind of tell you what I would do on our own farm. So when I say defoliate, I don't mean just spray with Roundup, although that's what a lot of conventional farmers would do. I would plough probably, so I would bury the previous crop, so it would have either been grazed or mown short, and then I would plough it. I would then create the seed bed. So I'd probably do that with running a cultivator through the land, and making a nice fine seed bed. I would then broadcast or direct drill into that seed bed, and you can use some very basic technology here. A basic seed spinner, I've known people that have used slug pelleting machines, but set up for grass seed on the back of a quad bike, and they've very successfully managed to put on the right amount of grass seed. You've just got to fill it up a couple of times. So get the seed, get it cultivated, and the moment you park the tractor up and it's cultivated, get the seed spread on it immediately, because obviously all those weed seeds will start to try and germinate as well. So get the seed on the ground, and then really roll it in. And it's, don't worry too much. I've heard people saying, oh, I don't want to squash it too hard or compact it. The cultivations will have taken out any compaction issues. That's the beauty of using a plough and a cultivator. So roll it in with a good firm roller. If you've got a ring roller, use that. I just use a flat roller, and that's, it weighs about a ton, and I'll roll that in. Obviously, with all of this, you need to make sure that the soil conditions right. You need to be able to travel on the land, so it can't be too wet, but equally it can't be too dry. You don't want to be a dust bowl and losing all your topsoil because it's getting wind blow or anything like that. So getting it just right is perfect. Once it's rolled in, shut the gate and hope for some rain, light rain preferably. There's plenty of contractors out there that will do the job for you, but that's really the process of getting it done. It's it does take some planning, but if you've got a field and it's sort of full of docks and nettles and you want to be organic, then the only way to really do that properly is to mow it off short and plough it and start again. And then you can put the seed of your choice in, and you can have all of the right plant species. So there's sometimes you can overseed successfully through sort of graze it off short or mow it short, harrow it well, and then spin some seed on. That does work. But if you've got some compaction issues there as well, you're just going to be kind of wasting your money a bit, really. So I hope this really helps. I'll move on to the next one. So just a quick slide on planning your grazing and your cutting on your fields. So when you're looking at your maps and you kind of know where you like your horses to be during the summer months, you might opt for an extensive system during the summer, where you might have sort of, I don't know how many you've got, 10 or so, out ranching some of the land, and that's okay for short periods, a few couple of months, that's fine. But you really need to be thinking about how you might be able to rotationally graze your fields, or mob graze them. So you could put all of those animals together in a small acre paddock with electric fence, and you can move that every couple of days. I know my wife's very glad for a break from all the children and the animals, so I'll take the dog and my daughter and my son with me, and we'll go out whatever the weather, and coats on and in the rain, and we'll move some electric fences and we'll get some animals moved around. So however you want to work it, just think that in terms of animal impact, like I said earlier about the buttercups and the other weeds that are potentially undesirable, if you're creating the opportunity for them to thrive by overgrazing areas, and obviously the horses aren't eating those particular species, then you're kind of giving them an unfair advantage over all of the grass which you want, and all of your herbs in the grazing sward. So think about how you graze it. There's various things like the electric fencing's come a long way nowadays. You can get geared reels. So when I mean geared reels, I mean like a 3-to-1 ratio on the reel. So as you wind, it goes round 3 times as you wind once. So we've got those, and we can put up hundreds of meters of electric fence really quickly. Have a good stomp round with the dog and the kids, and everyone gets out the house, and gives the wife a bit of peace and quiet. So yeah, see how you go with that. Obviously, you'll have to tailor it to your individual horses and their requirements, and some of them may be on restricted grazing. But I have had customers in the past that have changed the way they're grazing. They've gone mob grazing with the rest of them. The couple of ponies that have got that get laminitis, well, they follow behind in the paddocks that have just been grazed by the other horses. So there's nothing much for them in there. Just a few rough grasses, and that's worked quite well. And they have sort of a staggered grazing, so these horses, the laminitic ones, follow on behind. So there's not a lot for them in there, but you're constantly moving your animals around, and you're constantly getting the regrowth that you need. So in terms of cutting, I think it's always good to have a plan in terms of what hay requirements you need, and your sort of feed, what your feed bills are and your hay requirements are. So obviously try and plan that accordingly, and if you haven't got your own tractors, then try and think of the contractor. They really want fields that are stone free, molehill free, because they want to make you good hay and haylage. They don't want you to be disappointed. They're going to be putting in the diesel and the hours to make sure that you get a nice crop. So try and shut up a decent field for the hay cutting. And make sure that you've gone through the kind of basic steps that we talked about previously around soil management, your soil analysis. Make sure you've done your soil analysis, for those fields, and that you are aware of the nutrient offtake for that land. And good luck, and I hope it works really well. We'll switch over to the next slide. Hi, so just to recap really, so get your soil samples taken and send them off immediately. I go as far as I put them in food grade bags, and I leave the tops rolled down in a box on the farm truck until I'm ready to tie them up and send them off, because I don't want them sweating, and don't leave them in the hot sun, or let them get frozen. Take a bit of care with how you're sending them off, to get them sent off so that you can get your results back. Like I say, it's only sort of 15-20 pounds, maybe 30 pounds for the extended sample, which isn't a lot of money, and you'll get some really good results, and then you'll be able to inform your management. If you don't know these things, then ask in our community group on Facebook, or direct message me, and I'll be happy to help you. So dig your soil pits as well, find the problem areas, check out where there's compaction in your field, where the drains are blocked, all of those kind of things. They'll all help you improve what you're doing. And you'll get a good idea, and you'll be able to build a list of what areas need some attention. There's lots of contractors around the area, so there'll be plenty of people that will be able to help. And it's just finding the right person with the right equipment and timing it for the right time of year and the right soil conditions, which it's logistics, isn't it? That's all it is. So price up an acre of herbal ley seed mixture. You can get, like I say, the overseeding mixtures, and you can get the ones that are already mixed with the grass that are for full reseeds. So you could just add, if you've already got the grass species you like in your fields, in your paddocks, then you could just add the herbal ley species as an overseeding treatment. But you'd need to make sure the ground is pretty well harrowed and cut short, so that you've got some bare ground and some tilth to establish that seed. And overseeding can be a bit hit and miss. I'm not going to lie, I've got a direct drill and I do quite a lot of it, but you don't get the weather right, or the existing sward in the spring particularly smothers the new seedlings coming up. It can be a bit tricky to get it established, but once it's there for a pretty long time, and you will be reaping the benefits from it. So really good luck to you. I hope it works. Right, next slide. So guys, thanks so much for watching. I know that if you've got this far, you're pretty keen on on getting the right information and putting it into practice. And it's been a pleasure doing this for you. I wish I could spend more time. I'm 4 minutes over my hour. At first I was thinking, oh, how am I going to fill all of this hour? You know, what would I say? But it's gone really quickly, and it's just been the tip of the iceberg. I have so much more I could share with you, and we could go deep on the detail into so much more of it, but I really, the point of this was to give you a real quick overview and help some of you with underperforming fields and paddocks and farms get the better out of your land, get the best out of your land. And if you need any more information, you know, find me in the Facebook groups. We've got a Equestrian Grassland Management Facebook group, which is growing at the moment. I think they've got my first 30 people in there, which is great. And I'm really, you know, I'm really keen to serve in that group. You can find us on R&L Warren Farming and Haylage Facebook page. My mobile number's on there. If you've got any more problems or you want some expert help, I'd love it to be me that helps you, and give me a shout. Thanks ever so much for watching. Bye bye then.